Election Eve day. Here we sit at the Amherst kitchen table of Hampshire College astronomer and the head of Kainaat Studios, Salman Hameed, Mr. Universe. We're going to take a very particular role this election week on the Fabulous 413, which is we're going to be the oasis in the middle of NPR's other programming that is going to go wall to wall talking about the minutia of swing states and this and that that's going on with the campaign. We're going to view things through an election lens, but we don't need to get into the details about voting and polls and all that nonsense. However, elections do have consequences, and that is what you would like to talk about as an academic astronomer here today.
Well, thank you. And I really, for a brief minute, I thought you were going to ask me for astrological predictions.
Can you give me your astrological prediction as who's going to win the election? We already talked on Friday's show about how there's an octopus that's supposed to be psychic that chooses who's going to be the next president.
No, I mean, I think, there are a couple of things regarding that. Of course, there are implications to that. And the two big issues that are out there that has a direct implication on science. One is climate change. This is, in some sense, one of the biggest issues out there, and we can talk about how things are going one way or the other in terms of politics, in terms of social factors and others. But the world itself, we are in serious trouble. And just the flooding, for example, in Spain that just happened, that is just one thing. And of course, we are more familiar within the US context about hurricanes. Last year, there was devastating floods in Pakistan. And what I worry about within that context is that we are getting used to hearing about these insane numbers that come out, like in Spain, where a year's worth of rainfall fell in a few hours. Mm-hmm. And you move on. You hear about temperature off the coast of Florida being over 100 degrees. And you move on. Mm-hmm. And so what to do about that? And it is very clear from that context that former President Trump, he pulled U.S. out of the climate treaty agreement in some sense. And President Biden brought it back, and I think that is really important for that. So, and it is not just about the U.S. either, because what U.S. does in terms of climate change actually impacts the entire world. So this is a really important issue. And of course, the second issue, which you have talked about in general, it has been talked about in the elections, and it's about health. Women's health also, but also we went through the pandemic in 2020, so we have an idea in terms of what these approaches are going to be. And if we go in the direction of, I wouldn't say dismantling scientific institutions, but certainly what was happening before, and we still are dealing with the legacy of this mistrust of science. And these are not new issues, but there is a difference when you have these doubts being sowed by the White House, by the president. Then it takes a very different thing. And even though scientific institutions are still considered in most cases as bipartisan, there is more respect for that as well. But in some cases, like the vaccine issues and others, you can actually see the erosion of that, and then this issue of whose reality we are looking at. I think we can go in the path if you have a president that sows doubt from the top. You have Elon Musk, for example, with Twitter, actually dealing with that. And something that we have talked multiple times, and I will again bring that in, issues of aliens, for example. And this is like, hey, who cares about UFOs and things like that, or UAPs? But remember, that is something that was brought in by the New York Times. And now somehow that issue, even though most scientists will tell you that there is no basis to that, but somehow there is this alternative reality about that government maybe is hiding something. There have been congressional hearings about it and others. So it does matter what science can tell you in terms of reality. And if you start to erode that sense, and the UAP example that I gave, I mean, it's a little bit off currently from the political divisions in there. Nevertheless, that is, I think, another place where we should worry about losing our sense in terms of our trust in science. And I'm saying trust in science with all the caveats of the misuse of science and things like that. Nevertheless, we do know, for example, that climate change is real, and we really have to worry about our future.
There was an article in the magazine Nature just last week that talks about the implications of this election and what it will mean for the United States as a scientific superpower. You came from Pakistan to study here in the United States, I'm imagining, because of the reputation of the schools that were here and what you knew you could learn here that was appealing for you to come and leave your whole life from Pakistan behind.
And so this is another aspect to that. The President Trump had initiated two things. One was what was called the Muslim ban, and that had damaging consequences quite a bit. And that was a ban on travel from several of the Muslim majority countries. And then he also had something called what got dubbed as the China Initiative, and that was to really go after a lot of the Chinese scientists who are in the US and suspecting them of espionage. And oftentimes there were multiple cases that went up, and oftentimes those were small clerical errors. If you have a National Science Foundation grant that they mistakenly put one or did not check the right box and things like that, and almost all of those cases have been dismissed or thrown out. But it has a chilling effect on people coming from outside working here. And you can imagine, if you are coming from somewhere else into a new culture and a new country, well, you are not, I mean, you are on alert, and you are insecure in the sense that, well, I don't know where I am, I don't know what mistake can I make, and so on and so forth. But then you have, again, these institutional decisions or institutional actions that target you. And so you can imagine how vulnerable you feel personally, and then what you convey to other people who want to come. And so just in case, if you are looking at the contributions of people who are coming from abroad to the US science, 43%. So again, 43% of the doctorate holders in the US workforce in STEM fields, that's science, technology, engineering, and medicine, and math, were born outside the US. So that's a huge. So if you think about, hey, science is what? I mean, if you think about the context, science is what makes US a superpower. Science is what makes US sort of economy run. That's all the innovations that are coming in. Well, 43% of the scientific workforce, the PhD holders, were born in other countries than the US. So they are the ones who are coming in, and there is a reason why we come in, because science is so cool. You have institutions that welcome you and so on and so forth. But if you have actions that were taken, for example, previously, then you can have a drop in those, and that US has also been seeing a drop in the people who want to come to the US and work here.
Some of the things that the Trump administration or the potential future Trump administration have said is, going back to the idea of keeping the southern border of the United States closed with a wall or what have you. There may be people listening to this that are more sympathetic to Trump's views about immigration and say, well, we're not talking about the scientists. We're not talking about those people that are coming over to study from other countries, to get their doctorate, to get in medicine, to get in the STEM fields. That kind of immigration they don't have as big a problem with. What's your take on that perspective?
Well, I mean, this is one of those things that, Trump campaign has also tried to do, sort of pit one type of immigrants against another type of immigrants.
The model immigrant myth.
That's exactly right. And one of the things, first of all, purely from a human perspective, I think there is a problem regarding that, because lot of the people who move or who want to come to the US or any place else, I mean, it's not just the US that is doing that. There are really problematic policies in the European Union as well. And oftentimes people are moving because they have to. Because there are, for example, wars going on over there, and many of them are climate refugees because the wars or the civil war or the situation over there has gotten worse because of climate change but oftentimes those wars or climate change impacts are are sort of like the result of actions of the US and other large powers. So we are not completely innocent in terms of, hey, why do these people want to come here? It's the same thing, sort of like, when sort of like post 9/11, there was this, I think it was a Newsweek cover story. Why do they hate us? And it was just such a sort of like, weird type of framing, because we have to know what our government's actions are that are impacting other people in other countries. So that's part one. I mean, it gets a little digression from the very specific question that you asked, but I just want to bring back, because this is something that is on many people's minds, and I think it should be on more people's minds, of what is happening, for example, in the Middle East and in Gaza. Mm-hmm. Those are the US weapons that are being used. So we cannot wash our hands off and say, rest of the world, we just drop bombs over there. I don't know why should they be upset, or why should they be impacted by the US. I mean, there is a reason why people look at the power of the US. And again, as Spider-Man would say, with great power comes great responsibility. So you cannot remove the responsibility part. The great power is there. So when you look at people who are trying to come to the US, and again, nobody wants to leave everything and leave your country and to trek across the deserts, or even to more comfortable migration like I did, sort of like, getting on a plane to come here. It is hard. You have to give up a lot. You have to give up your established life over there. You have your friends, you have your relatives, everybody, and you start up new. So you can just imagine yourself going to somewhere else where you don't know the language, you don't know the culture, you don't know how you say, thank you, how you say, for example, how do you order stuff, how do you get to a grocery store, and how do you get stuff. Every single step is extremely hard, and that, I think, people have to realize. And one of the immigration very specific questions to that, and I'm not talking about the immigrants who are more well off or more privileged, because that also happens, and and I'm one of those in that context, and our scientists. But in general, there have been studies that have shown that immigrants actually generally have a positive impact on that, because if you just think about, those are the people who have the initiative, even if they are escaping, fleeing from some other place, they want to do good. They are usually hard workers. They understand that you have to actually work hard in order to make yourself, establish yourself and not. And that's one of the reasons why immigrants in general actually end up more their kids end up as more successful and that stuff. So for me, it's a no-brainer, both from the humanitarian perspective, from the perspective of our own responsibility, and from the perspective of the overall impact of immigrants in the country. Now, it's not an easy solution, because there are also issues, because how many immigrants can come in? How many can we take? Yeah, those are tough issues. But just to block people off simply because we don't want people to come in, or simply because of, and oftentimes it's xenophobia, which President Trump has explicitly said, because it's not that the immigrants that he objects to, it's the wrong kind of immigrants. And he has explicitly said, that, he wants immigrants from Sweden, or from from Scandinavia, but not from countries that, he has used certain words to describe people from Haiti and other places. So that's where the problem lies.
And you, as an immigrant, Salman Hameed, Hampshire College astronomer, working here for many years, living many, many years in the United States, are saying that even the rhetoric of anti immigrant rhetoric may have chilling impacts on people, not just from the places that the Trump administration does not want to see people coming from. If there is a brilliant scientist in Pakistan or another predominantly Muslim country, when a Muslim ban goes into effect, now that brilliant scientist who could have come to the United States, contributed here, made a major impact here, may reconsider or think about going someplace else simply because of the rhetoric, even if it would have still been possible for them legally to come over here.
Absolutely, and that has been the case where, and frankly speaking, I also get emails for advice and things like that, and especially from 2016 to 2020, if there were students who were planning on coming from Pakistan to the US, and I would say, well, I mean, you should really think about it. If you really want to come here, there are other places you can go to. And indeed, at that time, the flow of, and I'm using just the example of Pakistan, which I'm more familiar with, the flow of students to Australia and New Zealand had actually increased, in Canada had increased, and those were the students who would have come to the US. And so again, one aspect is very practical bit, but I also go back to the thing that what, as an American or as American policy, what we should be doing, what is right, like not just hey that it benefits us. And I think we should be a welcoming place. I mean, that is what I think. I mean, and I've benefited from it. That is what makes America America. That you can actually come here and be successful, but it's not that easy, but you can do that and you can actually contribute to that. But there has to be, purely from a human perspective, there has to be a positive attitude regarding that, considering the population that came, that rules, or the ruling class, or the people who are dominant in the US were all immigrants to a certain degree, and what happened to the indigenous population within the United States context. Mm-hmm. And so just purely from that, to say that, well, we want to treat certain immigrants in a different way, or we want to stop certain people from coming in, that would be hypocritical. And from science perspective, not just, I take a broader view of that, and I've mentioned the China initiative, for example, which targeted Chinese or Chinese-born scientists who were working in the United States legally and everything. And now, even under President Biden, that kind of rhetoric, even though he he stopped the China initiative, nevertheless, there is a bit of a hostility towards Chinese scientists, that, oh, they are here to steal secrets and so on and so forth. And I find that actually quite depressing, and I think dangerous, because China and US are competing now for sort of in the sciences, and you can also economically and other places. But one of the wonderful things in thinking about science, and we talk about oftentimes about James Webb Space Telescope or others, that science can give you a broader perspective. Carl Sagan had that pale blue dot, this was the picture that was taken by the Voyager spacecraft when it went beyond the object of orbit after its encounter of Uranus, and it turned back and it took the picture of the Earth, and all you could see was a pixel, a dot. And he wrote beautifully about sort of that this is where we all are. But then we are all fighting over dominance. We are doing terrible things to everybody else, or discriminating other people just for a brief period of time, on sort of fighting over who can own a little bit more of that dot, right? So from that perspective, I mean, wouldn't it be great? And again, it is sad for me to say that this seems like a terribly unrealistic thing, but wouldn't it be great if, for example, Chinese scientists and the US scientists are working together to solve problems, and they do work, they have worked together. In fact, some of the most cited papers have been actually together with European, Chinese, and US scientists when they work together. But that collaboration between Chinese and US scientists has been dipping sharply. And it's because of this particular attitude. On the contrary, it would be amazing. We talk about lunar bases as well, and we often talk about, well, we have to be really careful what's going to happen and things like that. Well, it would be amazing if it was being thought of that we are jointly thinking about these things of how we are going to explore the moon. And there were that type of thing. There was a little bit in the Cold War, the previous Cold War, I should say, with Soviet Union. There was a little bit, but scientists would try to bring that up. I think that's the spirit we should be thinking about, rather the rhetoric which was started by President Trump. But unfortunately, the anti-China rhetoric has continued under President Biden as well, and probably that kind of policy will continue if elected, and hopefully if elected, President Harris as well. But I think that's a problematic approach.
It's interesting, and this is one area that I can say that I definitely agree with former President Trump. He has a negative view of certain type of aliens, but he really loves aliens from outer space. He really wants to, if there are government secrets, disclose them. I mean, you got to try to find the common ground somewhere.
Right, but can I say, but I find it problematic not from President Trump, or from a President Trump's perspective, but you can actually talk to a lot of scientists that can say that this issue that you think that government is hiding aliens does not make sense. And we have talked many times about that in terms of why it doesn't make any sense. But it is just, I find it so frustrating that actually that kind of conversation is happening at the highest levels, whereas this is something that most scientists, not all, probably not Avi Loeb, for example, but most scientists will tell you that actually, no, we do not have any evidence for extraterrestrial intelligence.
I wanted to believe in something on this very agita-filled week. But I agree. There's not a lot of good evidence that the government is hiding aliens, so maybe I totally do disagree on most of Donald Trump's perspectives on everything. I probably shouldn't say. I'm going to get in trouble with the people about. So I'll put that aside, the thing about the aliens from outer space, for now. And just wait like everybody else to see where this rhetoric is going to lead us in the next couple days, weeks, months, and years.
And hope for a better future. I mean, no matter what happens, and I would also say that, that no matter what happens, I mean, I think we should all be striving for a better future, a more peaceful world. I think that we still need, and let's think about large-scale things about the universe. That's what we need. Think about the scale of space and time.
We need to elect Star Trek. Star Trek 2024. Picard.
Yeah.
Kirk. All of them.